This is page 343. This is the lesson 12.2 independent practice. Number 6. The graph shows the relationship between the hours a soccer team practiced after the season started and their total practice time for the year. How many hours did the soccer team practice before the season started? Before the season began? Well, this is going to be hard to find on this graph unless we interpret what it means when it says before the season. This right here is the practice time during the season, and this is the practice time for the year. So neither of those is before the season started. So how do we find before the season started? Well, we look carefully at the graph and we notice that 0 right here means 0 hours during the season. 0 hours during the season means before the season. So let's go up on the y-axis and see what it's at. It's at 6. So what I can do is I can interpret that this right here, 6, means 6 hours before the season started. All right, B says, what are the two quantities in this situation? These are the two things in the on the axes. It's the practice time during the season, and it's the total practice time for the year. So I'm going to say practice time during the season, and total practice time for the year. Okay, let's move on. Got to move my page up a little bit. Question C reads, what are the dependent and independent variables? There's a couple of ways to figure this out. I'm going to start with independent variable, and it doesn't ask us to explain, even though I'm going to verbally. And we haven't totally formally explained this yet, but we're going to do it now. The independent variable, when done correctly, is always the x, and the dependent variable, when done correctly, is always the y. So the independent variable is the practice time during the season. This is the x-axis right here. So this is the independent variable. So this is the practice time during the season. I'm just going to put practice during season. And this is the total. I'm going to change colors and highlight it. Total practice time for the year. And there's two ways to know that. One, I just told you to check the axes. The x-axis is always the independent variable, and the y-axis is always the dependent variable. But then the other thing is that the total amount of practice time for the year would depend on how much they did during the season. That's why. All right, question D. Is the relationship between the variables additive or multiplicative? Explain. Multiplicative means that all the y values would be multiplied from all the x values, and additive means they would just be added. So what are the numbers here? The first value is 0 and 6, and the second value is 1 and 7, and the third value is 2 and 8. We could even make a little table for that. Over 0, up 6. Over 1, up 7. Over 2, up 8. Over 3, up 9. So what you notice is that to get from the x to the y, you're just adding 6. 0 to 6, 1 to 7, 2 to 8, 3 to 9. Over 4, up 10. So that's not multiplicative because 0 times 0 is 6, 1 times 7 is 7, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 2.5 is 10. It's a different number every time. But what is the same is when we add. So when we see a question like this and it says, is it additive or is it multiplicative? Just ask yourself, how am I getting from the x to the y? I'm adding 6. Additive because we always add 6 to the x to get the y. And that's kind of our answer for D, or for E as well. All right, let's move on. E says, describe the relationship between the quantities and words. We'd say this, the y values are 6 more than the x values. Cool, good job. We are done with question number 6. Let's move on to number 7. Number 7 reads, multi-step. Teresa is buying glitter markers to put in gift bags. The table shows the relationship between the number of gift bags and the number of glitter markers she needs to buy. The gift bags is in the x-axis, or the x column, and the number of markers is in the y column. What is the dependent variable? What is the independent variable? They asked us this probably backwards from the way I would have thought about it. The independent variable is the number of gift bags, and the dependent variable is the number of markers. And that is because A, the gift bags is the x, and the markers is the y, and B, the other reason why is because the number of markers needed depends on how many gift bags you have. C says, is the relationship additive or multiplicative, and explain. Well, are we adding to get from x to 0? From here we would add 4 to get from 1 to 5. From here we would add 8 to get from 2 to 10. From here we would add 12 to get from 3 to 15. That's a different number every time. Or is it multiplicative? Are we multiplying? 1 times 5 is 5, and 2 times 5 is 10, and 3 times 5 is 15. What if I put a 4 here? Could you figure out this missing number? You could. You'd say it's 20. And you'd say that because you multiplied, which means it's multiplicative. When it says explain, I would say we are multiplying the x values by 5 to get the y values, I guess. So this one's kind of opposite of the one we did earlier. That was an additive relationship. This one's multiplicative. Question D says, describe the relationship between the quantities and words. Well, what do you notice about the number of markers? The number of markers are always 5 times greater than the number of bags. The markers are 5 times greater than the number of bags. Okay, good job. You're done with page 343.